Good morning everyone, and welcome to this photogrammetry tutorial. So this is going to explain my workflow for getting assets in from the beginning in the landscape into Unreal Engine. And I'm going to explain how I start out going into the field with the camera, finding the assets and taking the photos of it, and then it's going to lead up to how I get one of these objects into the scene here. So I'm just about to upgrade my asset packages here. So I got a Roman ruins asset package for Unreal Engine, and that's the one you're looking at here. And it's gonna get about 20 new Roman ruin pieces like this that I've been preparing. So I thought at the same time as I'm preparing those, why not make a tutorial about it so you can do the same. I'm also upgrading another package. I have an FBX package, which is a standalone package that does not involve Unreal Engine. It's these same assets, but you can use them in whichever 3D program you want. So it's an FBX mesh and the textures that goes along with it. So all of that's going to be packaged and published on the Fab Marketplace. So I made an overview of what I'm going to go through today in the video I made a couple of days ago. I'm going to link it up in the corner here. And you can take a look at that to see if this is something that you want to invest your time in, because it's going to be quite in-depth, and it's looks like at the moment of editing this that it's going to be around 2 hours long. So hopefully you'll find it useful and you stay with it. But I think I have a great workflow, and I think you will benefit from using that. So without further ado, let's dig into it. Step number one. The first thing you would have to do is, of course, get out to a place where you can find an object that you can scan and take all the photos that you need. Now, I have all these Roman ruin pieces, and I found a lot of them in the same spot. So I got very lucky there. I could get around 80 pieces. And what I do is, for a simple object like this, something around between 50 and 100 images is quite fine. And I just take a small step between each image and just think of the overlap I will get. And there's no need to overdo it. You have to find the balance so you don't take too many images. Now, it never hurts with too many images, of course, but it will drain your time. And if you're not confident of the results you will get and you just continuously take too many images, you will lose time, because I had to do 80 of these, and I couldn't do that if I would take like 300 images per object, and my back would have killed me as well after a while. So here I took around 50 images, and then I bring them into Lightroom, which is step number 2. You got to sort them out in Lightroom or something similar. So in Lightroom I will go over to the develop module, and I set it to, in this case, camera flat, just a flat profile. And if needed, you can also adjust the exposure. So if there's some that the exposure is a bit off, just to bring them into the range so they're kind of similar. It doesn't have to be that exact. Reality Capture can handle it. And then delete all the ones that are crazy blurry, so they're not screwing up your solution. And in case you want, you can also increase the shadows a bit. Now, I tend to not make these like super flat, like completely just get the shadows all the way up and get the highlights all the way down, because I find the solves get better if there's a little bit of contrast in it. You get a bit more detail out and it doesn't fail as often. That's my experience, at least. And since I'm going to save this out now as 16-bit PNGs, I can bring up the shadows in the textures afterwards. So I'd rather do that instead and just keep them looking kind of natural like this. But a good flat profile is nice to have. So export this in 16-bit PNGs, and we're going to go to Reality Capture next. So in Reality Capture we need to load the images. So just click on the folder, navigate to where you saved them, got them here. And I'll go up just see. So I got them here in the folder called images. Select that. Now it's going to say HDR image detected. And I will keep use original. I found the gains you would get from converting them is rather minor if any. I haven't measured it, so I don't know actually, but I have no problems with using 16-bit HDR images. It's fine. And I don't want to create doubles, which is what it does, and it creates a huge mess in my folder structure, especially if you have to move the files around. That's one of the weaknesses of reality capture. It's that the file paths are very hard to maintain. It's only absolute file paths, and if you lose it, you have to relink it, and it can be a huge pain. So let's click Use Original and load them in, and that goes very fast. Now we go to alignment. So if you have a clean reality capture where you haven't tweaked with anything, just click the Align Images. So you got your settings here, but I think the default settings are pretty good, and I think there's only need to tweak these if you don't get the results that you want, if it breaks or something like that. Then there are a few things that you can change. You can easily double this here, max features per image and per megapixel. 10,000, 50,000, you could easily go 20,000, 100,000. That will probably do something. And this here, max feature reprojection error. This one does a lot actually. If you set that to something very high, like 10, it's going to solve a lot more, but you also get a lot more errors that you might have to sculpt out afterwards. But it can be the matter of it solving or not solving. So it could be something you could tweak with. And there are also a few ones here, but we're not going to touch them at all. So with the default settings, I just click Align Images and wait a little bit. There we go. 7 seconds later, it's finished. And we are going to crop it in, and then we're going to generate the mesh. Like so. Then we go over to the mesh model. In the mesh model settings, so we got pretty much you can choose between high detail and normal detail, and the high detail is the one I always use for my images, and the normal detail, it's gonna take half the resolution of the high detail image. So in this case I have a 24 megapixel image, and it's then going to half it, so it's going to then be 6 megapixels, which is rather low. You're still going to get a usable object out of it, and it's going to look pretty good. A little bit soft, I think. But this mostly comes into effect if you're using a high megapixel camera. Let's say you got 60 megapixel, then it's going to sample it down to somewhere a little bit above 20 megapixel, and that's a good resolution. So then you could consider using that. But for me, even though I have a high resolution camera, if I use that, I don't have the heart to downsample it. I have to get all the quality I can out of it. And also, I find that it's better to get all the quality in and then decimate it down than to limit yourself with just using half the image. So with that said, this is a 24 megapixel image, and we're going to generate high detail from that. So I click it. And now we wait. This is going to take a couple of minutes, so I will speed this up. Okay, and we're done. And it took around 3 minutes. So let's analyze what we got here now. The mesh is looking good and high detail, I think. Just the right amount of detail we want for an object like this. Seems to be almost no errors. It's going to be missing underneath here and there a little bit. So what we got to do when we export this, we got to sculpt away the base here, of course. Got to cut it off and sculpt in the bottom. So this is a very simple object. It's as simple as it gets. I pretty much only have to remove the bottom and make a little bit of a stone structure underneath, and then it's done. So let's see how big it is. So it comes in at 22.7 million triangles, which is fine for an object like this. Could go even higher, but this will do. So next stage is I will have to put some colors on it. So I'm not going to use the texture at this stage. It comes way later, and I'm just going to colorize it. So this will calculate some vertex color for me. And I'm just going to hit that, and it will take a minute or two. So what this allows me to do when I export it into 3D Coat, which is next, I will have the color information there, which makes it easier if I have to sculpt away some plants sticking out or something like that. I'll see a little bit more what I'm doing. In this case, it's not really that needed because it's that simple, but quite often there will be grass growing and things like that, and you need to find it and get rid of it. So I prefer to put the colors on. And it's finished in 31 seconds, and here we go. That's about it. So now we just got to export it. To export it, you will have to go into the mesh model, find the dense mesh model, and then navigate to your object. In my case, it's this one here. And create an export folder, and I have one here since before, but I'm gonna create this. It's gonna be add tutorial on it, and it's gonna be FBX because that's way I get the colors. If I just choose OBJ, the colors are not going to come in, not in 3D Coat. The colors will be there, and you can open it in other programs, but not in 3D Coat. So FBX is going to have to be fine for now. And in the FBX settings, now this is actually, it's one of those things that, it's another thing that Reality Capture doesn't do very well. It's how the grid system works, the world coordinates. So in Reality Capture itself, it's got one of those set up worlds, so it's like 3D Studio Max and, well, actually like Unreal Engine as well, it's close to that. But all the other programs, Blender, Maya, Houdini, 3D Coat, you name it, they all have Y up. So we got to correct for that. And also the scale is going to be off by quite a lot in this case, actually. So in this case, if scale is set to 1, here it's gonna be, well, if you take it into Houdini, which has meter, then it's gonna be, everything is gonna be completely different. And this is a huge problem. It's actually super annoying, but best is as you go, wherever you export it from, just take notes and try to figure out how it flips and turns in your program, in your software, and then just write it down so you know it for the next time, so you don't lose too much time and sanity of flipping it right when you bring it back into Reality Capture, which we are going to do later on. So here we go. So we got transformation presets. It's Blender and Maya, and that's the ones I go for. There would be others to use as well. You got the default, and you got Unity, Unreal, 3ds Max. But this one is the one that's closest to me. At least what it's going to do, it's going to flip the Z to the Y, but it's still going to be a couple of errors in it. So yeah, bear with me. We'll sort it out. So I just click OK here. And that's it, finished in 18 seconds. Now let's take a look in 3D Coat. Step number 4, sculpting in 3D Coat. Now this is one of my absolute favorite programs. It's the things this one can do, I don't think any other program can do, and it's the voxel sculpting. That's why I really love this program. So we are now going to open the mesh that we exported before, and when you start 3D Coat, it can be kind of confusing because it doesn't behave as normal programs does. It's built up of different rooms. So you got the sculpt room, the paint room, and yeah, you name it, room. And it's a little bit tricky to transfer objects back and from those rooms. So it's a little strange in the beginning. You'll get used to it though. But that's why this startup screen here is so important. Do not click that away. This will help you a lot. So you just got to figure out what are you doing at the moment. And right now we're going to do some surface sculpting. So I'm going to click surface sculpting. And you got little stuff, some things you can load, or you go to file, and we're going to go to file. So in here we're going to go to where we saved it in export. And this org tutorial here, that's the one. And then we just wait. If it's a very dense mesh, it can take a while for it to come in. There is a hard rule here. You can't have more than 100 million polygons to load in one object. Anything above that, it's going to break the machine. So keep that in mind. We're good now because we only got a little bit over 20 million. So we just close these down. And we check what we got. And here we have it. And now you see we got the colors with us as well. So that's pretty neat. So now what we're going to do, we're going to cut this base off here. And you can see here, this is the outliner. So it loads the object here. This one we actually don't need. It's an empty object. Comes in whether you like it or not. Don't know why actually. But there we are with that one. So this S here stands for that we are in surface mode. There are two modes. You got surface mode and you got voxel mode. Volumetric mode. So let's start in surface mode. This is just your average standard mesh with polygons. And this works fine to do a lot of operations with. So I'm going to do a few here now. If I middle space bar, I get up the menu for the tools and I click the cutoff. You get the same tools here on the side. And at the top here we can choose either the lasso tool or we can choose the drag rectangle tool. So we're going to do that. So what this is going to do, we're going to drag out a rectangle and then it's going to cut it off. But before we do that, we're going to switch over to ortho view. So now everything becomes flat, which helps a lot with the cutting here, or else you get like a perspective in the cutting. So here, let's just try it immediately. Just drag a rectangle and it's going to cut it off. As easy as that. So this works very good in surface mode. And in surface mode, used to be my favorite, but they have made so many improvements with the volumetric mode that now sculpting in voxels is the way to go. Just a couple of years ago that wasn't that good. It was a kind of a clunky experience, but the recent improvements are really something else. So if you haven't tried this for a couple of years, you could try it again. You'll be pleasantly surprised. It's really nice. So let's cut this off here as well, see what happens. So you can see this goes pretty fast, and I actually don't have to turn this one into voxels if I don't want to. But since for me it's the preferred way, I'm going to do it anyways. So let's say we cut this off here, and we could just continue now, just cleaning it up and cutting it all away, and then we'd be pretty much done with it. But we are going to voxelize it. Before that then, though, we are going to separate disconnected parts. So this is just going to clean out floaters. So if I do that, size of pieces to delete, I go to 10,000. So this is polygon clusters that are 10,000 or lower. They're all going to be deleted. And if there are clusters above 10,000, they will all be separated into a little list here on the right, but we don't have any of that. So this will take a little bit, but not too much. I like to drag it out like that and just delete the old one. And like so. So now all the floaters are gone. So in order to create, turn this into a voxel object, we just click the little S here and we'll turn it into V. So now you see by default it will turn it into 17 million voxels, but we want a little bit more. It's good to oversample it a bit. So I'm going to type 50 million. 50 million and click OK. So this my system can handle anything around 100 million without any problems, and 50 million is going to be quite easy to sculpt with. So I do recommend go up a bit so you don't lose quality between the conversions, because it is a conversion and it turns it into a volumetric material, so you are going to lose a few things. And if you have like a lot of thin objects, this might not be the thing you want to do. Like you got strands or grass or some cables or something. Voxelizing it might not be the best way, because it doesn't handle super thin objects that well. Okay, so it's done. And you can now see here to the left you got a new set of tools here. So these are the voxel sculpting tools now. But we're going to continue cutting things up. So press that again, go to cut off. And now I'm going to switch over to the lasso tool here. And I'm just going to clean up this here. So it actually goes super fast. Once it's voxels like this, it's actually really quite fast to cut things up. And you can see the speed is also pretty nice. Okay. So I'm going to speed run this. Once it's cleaned up, we do the next step. Okay, it's done. So the bottom is cut off, and the next step here would be to sculpt this in so it looks like the top there. So we got some tools for that. My favorite is right here. It's in the clay engine. So you got something called the wet clay here. I really like that one. Now I got you can put different alphas on top of them. Alphas is, you can see the thing in the middle there. So I got some brushes here. It would normally just have this, which works fine. But I prefer to have a little alpha there. You also then have, if you click that, you get edit brush parameters. If you want to use alpha on this, just a quick tip here, that you got to click in use current alpha down here, or else it's not going to accept alphas. In case you want to get the brush that I'm using here. Let's click that off. So now it's just a matter of sculpting this in. So control to go minus. You can see now I have like a drag dot thing there, which is not what I want. So I'm going to change that to a normal brush. And you can see how it kind of erodes the whole thing away. Shift will smooth, which works very good here as well. And then we just erode. So this is basically how I do the fixing here. And then once I level this out, I'm going to use some alphas. Actually, it's a VDMs, vector displacement maps. I'm going to create the bottom on that. So now I'm just going to sculpt this in, and I'm going to speed run this as well. Okay, that's going to be good enough. So I've smoothed it out along the edges there, make it blend in as good as I can, and now we are gonna stamp out the ground. So I have here a special Rome folder, which is just VDMs that I've snatched from my other models. So this is what you can stamp out. Now the thing is, There are some you get from the beginning, like these here, but they're not really that good. There are a few others as well. But it's really super easy to make these yourself. I'm going to show you how to do it. But first, I'll just demonstrate what this is all about. So what you got to do in order to get it to work, so you're going to drag these out. It's like you do in Zbrush when you drag out the alphas there. So it's the same thing here. But we're going to go down to what says surface here and click the surface extrude. And then go back to this Rome folder here and choose something. We're going to choose this one. Looks good. So you can see that would be the representation of it. We're going to change this mode here to, we got these two here. This is the drag dot. It drags it out and scales it. I'll show what that looks like. See here, drags it out a bit. I will increase the depth so it's 100%. Now the thing is with the drag dot, it works pretty good, but once it gets big, it starts getting a bit sluggish. And the last thing is that it can just pop a little bit, and it kind of drags it out over the whole objects, and that's not nice. This time it worked. So I tried to use that one a bit carefully, but there is another one, and it's this one here. This is just stamping, so you kind of control it with the size of your marker here, and then you just click and wait a little bit, and it's going to create that. Like so. So the bigger these stamps are, the slower it's going to go. If it's kind of small, this size here, it's really fine, it's fast. So I'm just using this here. And then I have a few of these I can just mix it up with if I want. So this is how I do the undersides. So now I'm just going to work all the way through here, just so the edges will be looking good. And for the edges I can actually go down to, let's say, 60%. Just mix it up so it doesn't look too repetitive. Even though it's the underside and it's probably not going to be that visible, and but you still got to take care that it doesn't look bad. So by just doing this, it's quite easy to get a good sculpt in. So I'm just going to do this for the whole thing, and I'll speed run it from here. Okay, that's it. The underside is now sculpted the way I want it. So I'm just going to save this. Okay, you can also click away the color here. Sometimes that can make it easier to see. So I'm just going to click that. I'll show what that looks like. We can see how it blends. Right now it's a little bit hard to see if it looks good underneath here. I think that's good enough. But here we can see we got this underside here, and that also needs to be fixed. Like this, yeah. So to fix that, go up to the wet clay again, shift the tool to the brush. And just gonna be smoothing this out, so get rid of the hexagons. And then I'm just gonna stamp there as well. Just see if there's any other spots that needs a little smooth work. See, here's a little bit. It always pays off to patrol it like this a little bit. So what you're looking for, except for these smooth parts, there can sometimes be what I call it sausages or Klein bottles. So this would be like little loops that goes out with a hole in them, and they are no good. They will cause a huge problem when you try to UV map this later and you have to remesh it. So those are a huge no-no. A simple mesh like this is not going to have it, but if you have something very complicated, you are going to get some of these loops. There are techniques to get rid of those, but I'll show you that when I do a more advanced model in the future. So here we just gotta, it's a decently clean model. See, even with the 50 images, we get pretty much all the detail we want from one of these. And the little errors I have is barely an inconvenience, I think. Here we go. So you can see you can do quite a lot of fixing afterwards. That is important to know. Also know your limits, because sometimes it can be very time consuming to fix things. It is of course easiest, the better scan you have, the easier it's going to be, the less time you spend on this stage. So it's always preferable to get as good a scan as possible out in the field, because this is not really fun to sit and do. Okay, I think that's it. So we're just going to do a little bit of an extrude there. Go back to the extrude. Brushes. Yeah, I think that's good. And I'll put it down to 40, because we just want a little bit of a just a little bit of noise in there, so it doesn't look let's see, doesn't look too bad. Undo. Yeah, like so. I think that will be good enough. All right. Now then, let's see if we can create our own VDMs. So in order to create VDMs, I have to actually duplicate my my object and turn it into a surface. I found that lately it works best in surface mode and not in the volumetric mode. So I will just create a duplicate of this, click that little button, and it will turn it into a surface. It is a bit unfortunate. It used to work very well, and but as of late something has gone a little bit wrong. I hope they fix it very soon, but this works as well. So then you just go down to pick and paste, and you drag it out. You get this little marker here. Now you have to be a little bit sensitive and not, it is slightly sluggish, so no big movements here, and just wait for it. So once you find something that you like, you just click once, you wait a bit for it to think, don't move around too much. You can see here now that it has created one there. So what we need to do is we go to our brushes folder and we navigate to where we want to save this map. We want it in our Rome folder. And then I click the Create VDM Alpha. And now you can see here, if I hover over that one, it's the one we created there. So mark down what it's called. It's called VD54612. It's good to know. So because it has a tendency to sort this out. That next time you open it, it might be somewhere in the middle here, and then you don't know which one it was you created particularly. But that's as easy as it is. And now you can just go down to your extrude, or we can go to our volumetric again, turn that one on, turn the surface off, go down to extrude, go back to the brushes, go back to the Rome folder. And this is what I mean. Now you need to remember what it was called, because now it's somewhere else. There we go, that's the one. So this is the one we did. And if I drag it out like that, set it to 100%. Stamp it down. There we go. Created a pretty much exact copy of what you had up there. So it's extremely powerful, and once you have it on your fingertips like this, it's really nice. I'm going to undo those two. And we're going to wrap this up. So I'm going to delete that surface we did there. And now we're just going to export this. So the next step is that once we've sculpted this, we are going to take it into Zbrush for the remesh. In order to do that, we are going to need one low-res mesh and one high-res mesh. So a few things I like to do just before. Since this is a volume, now, like I said, this is a very simple object, so not much has gone wrong with it as it is now. But one good practice to do is to click these fill voids. Because sometimes if you have, well, sometimes you can left little, we can call them air bubbles inside of the mesh. And we need to fill those in so that they are not there, and it creates like a little droplet that, well, it's going to show up when you're doing your UV mapping. But that's things that it happens. It kind of creates this billabong of a little left behind sausage in there. If you're careful, it doesn't happen that much, but it can be tiny ones as well. But this just makes sure that it's now completely filled in. There are no air bubbles inside. And then we are going to export it. So first we're going to export the high-res mesh. So you just right click, click export, export selected objects, and we go down to the 3D code. I will create a new folder called exports. I will name it high res. Now we're going to get a dialog window coming up asking us if we want to decimate it or not. And we're going to click don't decimate for this one. We want everything. This will take a while, so I'm speeding it up. It's done, and now we're going to export the low res as well. Do the same thing, just name it low res. We need something around 5 million polygons. So let's see, I can choose the percentage I want to decimate it with, so a little bit higher. Let's go for 87. There we go, that's good. And now it's going to decimate, and then we're ready. Now, I often include a smoothing path. I will go over the brush and smooth this. Today I might feel lucky and don't do it, but normally I would always smooth this out. Just to avoid what I mentioned before, these kind of Klein bottles and things. But this is such a simple mesh. that there will probably not be any. There we go, it's done. So now we're going to jump into Zbrush and do a remeshing in there. Step number 5, remeshing in Zbrush. Now we are going to import the low poly mesh we just exported from 3D Coat, and we're going to do a remesh. So I go to wherever I put it. The low res mesh is here, and I'm just going to import that. Drag it out, go into edit mode. Comes in masked for some reason, so just remove the mask. Switch to a high vis material like this, matte cap white 01 is good. And it also comes in with kind of a poly paint, so we're just going to remove that. And that's it. Now we are going to do a remesh. So if you roll out the geometry tab, down here you got the C remesher. And we're going to use this button here to keep groups. So in order to use that, we need to divide this into groups. So this really helps with edge flow. I could just hit the remesh button and get some pretty good results, but you often get like winding edges, turns into a spiral, even though in many cases it doesn't really matter because we're going to decimate this anyways. It does look a bit odd with UV maps. So the reason we're doing this is so we can get some good UV maps out of it. So what I like to do is divide everything into polygroups. Find the natural pieces and the natural line flows and divide them into polygroups. And this is also going to make it a lot easier to do the UV mapping, so it's not a waste of time at all. You can see this as a step towards making UV maps. So let's get started with this. So what you need to do is start painting a mask, and we're going to use the mask to create the polygroups. So in order to do that, I'll start with the bottom like this. Now this could be one, but we're going to refine it, of course. And I like to, if you press Control to go into mask mode, and you drag the focal shift all the way down to -100, just so you get a very, very sharp edge when you're painting this. And then it's actually just about painting, so resizing your brush, and in this case we're going to remove. So we can get like a nice edge. Now this is of course a little bit time consuming and a little bit boring to do, but like I said, it really helps you with the UV mapping. So it's 95% of the UV mapping is actually done after I've masked out all the sides of this object here. So I'm going to go around this object here and just paint it out so I get a nice clean bottom piece here. So I'm going to speed it up from now. Okay, that's done. So now you can see I got this nicely masked out. So we go down to the polygroups, and a little bit further down here you got group masked. So this is now going to create a polygroup out of this masked one here. And we can click the poly frame to see what it looks like. You can now see it's very dense, so it's you have to zoom in to see the color. You see this is now one group. Now we got to do the rest. So I can click this away. And then we do the other sides. So I think I'll do the back side here. So the process is absolutely the same. I'm just going to start painting this. So I'll do a speed up of this from now as well. Okay, that's another side painted. Hit the group masked, hide it, and then we continue painting. So now it's just about finding where the edges should go. You shouldn't really overdo this too much, not too many pieces. It is got to make the remeshing harder the more pieces you have. If you go too granular, so you need to keep it like a little bit realistic. So not every little nook and cranny like this needs to be separated. It will take too long, and it's not really necessary, and it's gonna cause problems as well. But okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm just gonna speed this up and do the whole thing, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, the masking is done, and it's now all in polygroups, and I have gone into quite some detail here, so we'll see how this works out when I do the remesh, if it's looking good or not. But a few words on what I have done. And well, the natural thing is, of course, whenever there is like a big change in the topology, you need to go in and separate it out. But I also sometimes do, if I got long thin objects like this, I would do a split in the half in the middle there, because the algorithms we use to unwrap these can sometimes have a problem with a long uneven object like this will turn into a bendy sausage, and it doesn't always look that nice. So sometimes I like to split it up into a couple of parts like I did here, because I think this one might look a bit bendy. But then this one is so flat that I think it's going to look quite okay when it gets unwrapped. It's one of those experience things. It's not the end of the world if it's bendy, but it just looks a little bit... it doesn't look that good. Okay, let's remesh. Go to the Geometry tab, and we're going to use the C remesher here, and we're going to click in the Keep Groups. So we're going to get the nice edge flow from the groups. The target polygons count, I'm going to start with 40. Now, the reasoning for this is that when we do a high resolution sculpt of this one, we want to end up with something that in Zbrush is around 40 million polygons. And in order to do that, the remeshed object should be around 40,000 polygons. And then when you divide it, you will see you go up to 2.5 million, and then 10 million, and then that will end up like a 40 million mesh. What you don't want to do ever is end up where your high resolution mesh is something like 25 million, because if you do one more divide, you're going to end up with 100 million polygons, and that's way too much to work with. So the absolute target for the high resolution should be between 40 and absolutely max 50 million. You got to think that this is counting it in not in polygons as such, but in quads. So 50 million polygon mesh here is going to be 100 million when you take it into another program. So that's quite a lot, and it's more than enough. It's more than you need. You need around 40 million is even more than you need most of the time, but I think it's a good number. Anyways, keep groups in. First round we test it at 40. We see where it ends up. You never know where it ends up. Click the set remesher, and here we go. Now normally this just takes a couple of seconds, but the more islands you have, polygroup islands, the longer it's going to take for it to find a good solution. So that's why you don't want to go like totally granular, just like hundreds of islands or anything like that. It's gonna struggle then. This should be fine, but we don't know. Here we go, and first impressions is it's looking good. A thing like this, they will show up, but usually they should just be a display error. So if I smooth that out, these kind of things disappear. It's looking good all over. So there might sometime be like a tiny floating island, and they are important to get rid of. But for now, I think it's kind of okay. This is not perfect by any means. Let's see if we can smooth that out a bit, just to... Okay, that'll work. Okay, I think that's good. So now we need to UV map this thing. So go to the Z plugins and we got the UV master here. And click off the symmetry, but click in the polygroup. So this will keep, will make all the polygroups into an UV island. And just click unwrap. And now we can see we got 15 islands, 15 polygroups, created 15 islands, and it's super fast. However, it has a drawback. You'll see click flatten here. You can see what it looks like, and it's a really good unwrap. However, it doesn't pack it at all good, so that's why we need to export this to another program in order to make a bit of a better packing, because this won't do. It's too much waste. So we're gonna unflatten it, but before we export this one, we actually have to remove all the groups here, because in UV 3D Coat, all of these islands is it's going to mess up the program. It's going to count as double, so you get like or every group gets its own UVs for some weird reason. So you get double the amount of vertices, and you have to delete them. It becomes a whole mess. So the solution to that is that you're gonna do a group visible. Just create one group out of the whole thing, and then do the export for UV. Yes. Now when you start up 3D Coat, you get this menu again, and you choose the UV map mesh option here, and you find the one you just exported, the for UV. Import it. Set 4096 is good. It's set to keep UV, so everything is good, and it's going to be imported. Okay. So it's going to end up in what they call the painting room, but we want to go to the UV room, and here we can see you got the mesh with all the UV islands. So let's see what 3D Coat does with its own unwrap. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, and you can see it looks pretty good. Some distortion in that one there, but nothing too serious, I think. So let's see with its own unwrap. It's decent. This island here is failing, so we can actually fix that in here. Let's see which one it is. Okay, so it's failing because of this island in here. So let's fix that. It's actually also got a little bit of a cut there, which we don't need. So this is something we could have painted in the polygroups as well. That's already better, but let's see if we can cut this off. So now we got that thing there. Maybe we do a bit of a split here. Just open up. You can get feedback so you see what you're doing at all times there. Let's see. So this is not going to be a tutorial of how 3D Coat's UV tools work, but needless to say, I think they're absolutely amazing what they do. So you got all kinds of tools to split here, and you do everything in the 3D view, and you even get a real-time feedback of what the island would look like. So this is just you hover over it and you see what it could end up looking like. At the moment it still looks like this. But you also got other cool tools. So you got the edge loop there, would just split it according to the edge loop. You also got these where you can paint down your own paths like this. Very powerful UV tools, and it makes UVing kind of a lot of fun as well. Let's select this one, and we go down here to the goo to goo. So this is the algorithm 3D Coat prefers to use when it unwraps. So if you just want to unwrap one island, you can just press this. We'll just see where we're at. And that's pretty good. I think that one is solved. Let's see if we have any other problems anywhere that we want to get rid of. So I think this is okay. Blue will be that you kind of lose detail here a little bit. We get smaller, but it's not too bad the way it looks. And the red will be that the polygon's getting bigger, so it's not optimal. But you can often, if I go here and I choose the relax option, we'll see it will turn a lot better already. So I'm going to do that. But first I'm going to do one more unwrap. But I think that's it. That's all the problems we had with that. So I'm going to go and do the unwrap. And you see it does a much better packing. It's still not the best packing you could ever hope for. If you have just a few objects, I would maybe go in and rotate these by hand. But I still think it's good enough. It's a decent enough packing. But you also have some packing tools here. You have, like, here is one called auto scale. This will ensure that they are all scaled exactly to what you to the size that they should be in. And then you can choose the pack UVs without doing the unwrap, and it would do a nice pack. So yeah, I'm going to go for this. So what you need to do, which is easy to forget, you have this apply UV set. So if you don't press this one, the UVs are not going to be baked onto the mesh. So it's a definite must, and never forget. Even though you will forget it sometimes, and it's kind of annoying that because you don't get the UVs on. And you might have the old UVs on, so you might still get a result, but then towards the end of the process you realize that you forgot to press the apply UV set, and well, you have to go back and redo it then. But now we're all good here. So just export this. Go to where you had the... I'm gonna put it here, and I'm gonna name it UVs. And just click the export. And that's it. Now this one should go back into Zbrush. Back in Zbrush again, and we're now going to import that UV map mesh that we did. So click import, go to where you saved it, and voila, there it is. It's now there. You got the UVs on the old mesh. Now we need the high-res mesh, so I'm going to import that. I go to where I saved the high-res mesh that I did before, and just click the import button. And we wait a little bit. It's a big mesh, so it will take a little bit of time to import it. What we're going to do now is transfer the details from the high-res mesh. So remove the mask and remove the polypaint, like so. Select the UV mapped mesh again and go to subtool, and we're going to append. We find the high-res mesh, this one here, and now you can see they line up good. And in the subtool here now we got the UV should be on the top and the high-res underneath. So with this one selected, just make sure it is the one selected. An easy way to see it is to go to the solo, and you solo it, and then you see which one is selected. And you can actually do all the operations with the solo clicked in. It's still gonna accept that this mesh is there. For instance, if you click this one off, it's not going to be part of any calculations, so I'll leave that on and then maybe solo it instead. Further down here we got the project, and we're just going to hit the project all button, and it's going to do the first projection. And what we do now is we're gonna start dividing it and going up in resolution. So I click Ctrl D to divide it once, and click project all. There we go. And then I divide it again, Ctrl D. I'm now up to 700,000 polys. project all. The reason I'm doing it at every stage like this, it's because every time the polygons comes a little bit closer to the high-res mesh, if you go directly up to the max subdivision, like 40 million polygons, and then try to transfer the detail from the other mesh, it might be that they're a little bit too far off, and it will create some overlapping, and the mesh is not going to look good. But if you do it like this, you're almost guaranteed that you're going to get very good results. And it doesn't take that much time in the beginning to do these projections anyway. So just step through all the projections, subdivide, project, subdivide, project. 2,800,000. This one is going to take a little bit longer time. That took about 40 seconds or something like that. So not super long by any means, but I'm still going to speed it up in between, because now we're up to 11 million here. And if I hit the project all, it might take maybe 3 minutes or something. I have now subdivided it to 44,805,000 polygons. So before I do the final transfer here, I would like to go down to my high-res mesh, and I'm just going to add a fine layer of detail on top of this. So I go down to the surface tab and click the noise button here, and now you can see, if I zoom in this window here, it's going to add a fine noise on top of it. So I like to do that for rocks and all these kind of things, just to break it up a bit. It could also be like if you have some blank spots where you have smoothed but you didn't fill in with any detail, this will be remedying that. Add a little bit of unevenness to it, so it doesn't shine too much when it's rendered. So with the noise in, I'm clicking apply to mesh, and you can see you get a fine unevenness. So back to this, and now I'm just going to hit the last project all. And this is going to take quite a long time, actually, maybe 10 minutes. So it's a good time for a coffee break. The transfer of the details is done. So now we are going to decimate this. It sits now at 44 million. So we're going to get it down to 1 million. So we go to Decimation Master. Now don't forget to click in Keep UVs, or else it would be all for nothing. And then just click Pre-Process Current and wait quite a long time. The decimation is done, or the pre-processing. So go back into the menu, and we're going to reduce it to 1 million polygons. So here in K-polys, type in 1000. Because 1000 polys is 1 million. Decimate current. And there you see 999,996. And then we just export this. This one we're going to name Nanite. Like so. And while we are here, we're going to export the high-res as well. Put it in the same folder. Name it high-res. Now, we didn't change this high-res model that much, but we should put that little noise on it, so it's still a little bit changed, and it's going to show up in the normal map, because we're going to use this high-res model to calculate the normal map. But sometimes you could have done more fixes in Zbrush, adding a little bit of more detail into the high-res mesh and that kind of thing. But once this is done, we're going to go back into reality capture. Back in reality capture, and we are now going to import the model that we just export. So go to where you saved the Nanite mesh. It's this one. Now we come to this problem of the coordinates. This is often a very tedious trial and error process. I can't for the life of me figure out any there is just no logic to how this works in a way. So it says it should have exported with Blender coordinates, and when you import it back in it should be the same, but it never really is. So the first time you do this, because everywhere you export it from is going to be slightly different. If you're working with it in Blender or in Maya or wherever, it's going to be a different scenario. So you do some trial and error, and you have to rotate and flip it until it comes in the right way. And once you've done that, be sure to save those settings. So you have a save settings here, so you can use the same for every consecutive object that you do. And I have done that. So I'm going to click this absolutely minimal arrow here, and I go down to my Roman ruins import preset 2, which is for this workflow that I have here. And you can see there are some crazy settings here. So it turns out that rotate should be set to -90. The rotate Y, it's actually to 0. The default here was -90 as well, and then it comes in wrong, of course. Now the scale is the strange one here. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I have to scale it 1,000 times. But the strange thing is, if I scale it just 1, it comes in as very, very big. So I don't know what happens if I scale it up 1,000 times, if it kind of wraps around space itself and comes back in smaller, because now it's smaller, it's actually correct size. But naturally it should have been that you set it to 0.0001 and then it would come incorrect, but it doesn't. So I'm not going to ask any more questions. If it works, and I have no problems with it, even though it breaks breaks the universe. Here we go, in it comes. Yeah, but it's actually not a joking matter. I think I've lost many hours and days because of this. Don't know why they don't bother to fix it. It's shouldn't be like that. It's absolutely frustrating. I'm going to rename this one to Nanite. We're just going to see that everything is okay, because things can happen on the way here. But this looks like it's absolutely matching up fine. The original back to Nanite, and you see they are the same. Because sometimes it can also happen that it can change the scale ever so slightly. And I think this is mostly something that comes from Zbrush, which can be a bit unstable when it comes to the scale. Even there, I don't know exactly when it does it or when it does not. I know for sure that importing FBXs into Zbrush is a definite no-no. It's going to scale it with like 10%, make it like 10% smaller or something like that. It's it's very annoying. So then if you have that problem, you have to export the base mesh, the one that you made the UVs on, and then scale it into as close as you can to the low-res mesh that you exported from 3D Coat, for instance. And then you just reproject the details. So it's not a huge deal, but still very annoying. You can work around it. Luckily, this time here, it seems to be all right. But sometimes it feels like it's a 50-50 chance if something happens on the way or not. And I think mostly it's Zbrush to blame there. Okay, so now we're going to put the texture on that. So with just the default settings, just going to hit the texture button. Be sure that you're in the Nanite mesh there. So just hit the texture and we wait a little bit. It actually doesn't take that long. And there we go. And looks like it fits perfectly. Very happy with that result. Now let's get a normal map on it. For that, we're going to import the high-res mesh that we did. Export it into the same folder. So we got this one here. Just double click. Then import those settings you exported before. And click OK. This is going to take a minute or two to import. It's quite a big mesh. And it's done. It's imported. We're gonna name this high res. And go over here to tools and find the texture reprojection button. Now you're going to choose the source model. Mine is called high res. You get a drop down here of all the alternatives you have, and it's going to be transferred over to the Nanite mesh, so it's also correct. And then you got to check that normal reprojection is on. We're just going to transfer the normals now, so that one is enabled. And that's it. Just hit the reproject button, and it should only take a few seconds. And there it is. It's all done. Looking good. So you might see that it looks more like it's in world space. This is fine. When you export it, it's going to be exported as a tangent space normal map, if that's what you want, which you most often want. So we're just gonna kill off this one here called color layer. This comes in with the export, with when you import the mesh, you get like a black color layer that is not used for anything. So to avoid confusion, just delete that. Now you got your 16-bit color layer with the texture 0, and that should be the UV map that you made before. Looks like that, right? And then you got the normal layer with also the same texture coordinates on. There we go. So with the Nanite mesh chosen, we're going to export it again with the textures this time. So if you go in here to exports, we're going to make a new one called textured. Like so. And then we know that this whole thing is going to end up in, you get all the textures together with the mesh there. And just click save. Okay, now we got some options here that we need to check that they're okay. And you're going to have to check that you got export textures clicked on. And you check that you got the 16-bit color layer, yes. And the normal layer, yes. And this is all what you need there. PNG, 48-bit RGB, And under normal transformation, just check, well, default should be good. One thing that you might want to tweak in the future, if you so want, you have the possibility to flip Y here, so you don't have to do that in Unreal Engine, because there's a difference with OpenGL and DirectX when it comes to normal map. So if you want to use it in most 3D software, you should not flip this one. It's the OpenGL coordinates that are the ones you're using. But if you use a game engine, it's most likely that they're using DirectX, and then you need to flip the Y coordinates, flip the green channel. Now there is a button for that in Unreal Engine, so you could either click it there, or if you're only doing Unreal Engine stuff, this could be the time that you swap it here as well. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it to OpenGL and flip it in Unreal Engine. So we click OK. And once this is done, it is now time to do some painting in 3D Coat. It's time to do some painting, so we're back in 3D Coat, and we're going to open the mesh that we saved out from a reality capture just now. And we got this menu again, and now we got to choose what we want to do. Paint UV mapped mesh per pixel is the one we want. So like that. So we navigate to where we put the file, and it's in exports, textured, and the Nanite. There, and we just wait for it to load. We're going to set the texture width and texture height to 8K. And keep UVs is on, and then OK. And it's in. the first thing I want to do is check that the texture's got the right size. So go down to textures, mesh and texture resolution, and check that it's set to 8K. Sometimes it can be set to lower even though you set it to 8K, it happens. Or you just forget to set it to 8K when you load it. But it's good, like so. And now we need to import, go to layers here, we need to import some painting layers. So we're going to find the diffuse from reality capture. We're going to go to import color albedo map. And we're going to go to the exports folder and import that. We don't need to import the normal map. This one is done. We are finished with the normals. And the paint operations we're going to do is rather simple. So it's mainly about fixing a few things. So here we go, it's in. We got an 8K texture on, and by pressing number 2 on the keyboard we go to absolute delighted mode, and that's where we're going to be working in. We don't want any shadow casting or anything, so we want to get rid of this underside here. So first I would save the scene. So the first thing we should do is try to delight it as best as we can, because even though it was shot on a cloudy day, you still get ambient occlusion on it, and you can see it's a little bit brighter on the top there than on the rest. So the best way to delight the ambient occlusion is, of course, to create an ambient occlusion map and use that as our basis. So we're going to go here to edit and calculate occlusion. And we're going to choose light sources. We're not going to use a sphere, we're going to use a hemisphere, because we have a ground. When this one was taken, there is a ground that will act like a hemisphere, so we get heavier shadows from the ground and up. And we're going to go with a 1 or a 0.455 ambient occlusion map. It's going to make it a lot darker than the one. The linear one, and this is good because we need a little bit more of a punch to get to be able to light it correctly in the crevices. We will click OK, and this is going to take a little bit of time. The ambient occlusion is done, and you can see how it's darkened down the object. So we're going to make a copy out of this one. Just right click, duplicate, hide the other one. I'm going to unlock this. Okay. Now we're going to right click and we are going to invert the color. Just flip it. Just a normal inversion here. So now we're going to get rid of the light that's in the crevices here. So we've got to change the blend mode. So it's set to multiply because it's an ambient occlusion, but we want something else. Now you can try a few of these, like screen, linear dodge. I actually prefer quite often that soft light works best. So I'm going to put it to soft light. You can see it already looks kind of nice and flat, but it's way too much. So I'm going to lower this to 50%. And I think 50% usually is a good starting point. Could be tweaked a little bit. Sometimes it gets a bit too bright in these kind of things. So just a little bit lower. I'm going to go 45. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So that takes care of a lot of the lighting, and it's a lot more flatter now. Let's see the before and after. Let's see, it's quite a lot more natural. Let's duplicate this one, and we're gonna do a similar thing, but instead we're actually gonna multiply it. So we're gonna bring down the peaks a little bit. The bright areas is gonna be brought down a little bit. So this is 50%, and that's way too much, or 45%, but it's still too much. So this should be quite low. I'd do something like 20 is a good start. You can see now they kind of meet in the middle there, but I think 20 might be a bit too much. Let's do 15. And I think that's pretty good. Now it's even flatter. So I kind of like this result, and this should take care of the delighting issues I would have. Now I can, if I want to, I could create some light if I got the sharper shadows, a light that matches up, and use that in the same way. Cast shadows on it and then delight it like that. But it's kind of a little bit tricky and time consuming. I prefer to go over with a brush if I need to darken and lighten things, like a dodge and burn operation over the mesh. It's usually just a little kind of simple, not too much, not too heavy-handed, just bring it a little bit more in line. But we'll see if we actually need it for this one. So next step would be to paint out this bottom here. So I'm gonna do a right click here and do a merge visible. Wait for that. Just cleans it up a bit. I find quite often it's a good thing to commit to operations. It's not to everyone's taste, but if you want like endless trees of operations and things, so you always can go back. It's of course how you should work in a professional environment, but I think for your own personal work, it's good to commit and just be better at knowing when it's time to stop and when it's time to commit your work, so you don't overwork and never finish stuff. But here we go. We got the diffuse layer here. Okay, let's paint this out. So you need to find your Smart Materials folder and have it accessible here, and your brushes could be useful as well to have, so you get some paintbrushes to choose from. If you can't find it here on the side, or if you accidentally click it away, you have under Windows panels, you got all the brushes here, so you just click them out and then you can drag them over to the side there. And we want to be in the layers here. Sometimes the 3D coat interface can get a bit messy and they can trip you up, and I do hope they improve that kind of thing. It does, it would confuse a lot of people who are not completely into it. Sometimes I still get a little bit perplexed sometimes when things just disappear and you have to put it back in its place. But anyway, let's do some painting here. So it's got 3D Coat's got a very powerful painting engine. It's kind of reminiscent of what you find in Substance Painter, but it's a little bit different. It's got more of an artistic approach to it, not so procedural as Substance Painter is. But here I have already prepared my materials that I want to use for this project. So you do this in your favorite paint application like Photoshop. So you got to do a tiling image map, and it's a very simple one. So let's open one here. So I have, let's see, this one. So I have here a texture that I've generated from whatever I took these images with. And it's always a good idea when you're out in the field to think about this step. How can you repair an object? So you need to create these kind of repair textures so you have a chance of doing some seamless repairing. So I've put together a couple of materials here, so I can use this for all my objects that I want to repair. And then it's as simple as you just choose one object, and I have it set to cube mapping. That's triplanar mapping. And just scale it in. We're going to make a new layer for it here, so we paint on something new and just paint it. So let's choose something like that, speed it up a bit. So this would be some kind of a mossy texture here. A bit too bright perhaps, but I have another one for that. This one fits a bit better, to be honest. So here you can scale it up and down the size you want from it. So I'm first when I do this, I'm just going to put a little bit of a base texture in here. Just to cover up all the worst parts. Before we start painting any further, I'm going to generate a cavity map that will allow me to paint in the crevices and things like that, which is very helpful. So first I got to check what the model looks like when it's lit, and then you can see that I have actually painted on my depth channel. Got them painted the normal, and this will actually be taken into account when you do certain operations, so I don't want that. Now you can, if you're careful from the beginning, you can use these here where you unclick the depth and just use the albedo to paint on that. But if you haven't done that, I recommend that you go here and put the depth channel to 0% to remove that thing there. And once you've done that, you can now calculate the cavity map. So I did this before, just now, and it looks like this. So you see here, it takes into account whatever I had in that normal map channel, which is good if you're doing that, but we're keeping it simple and it's not what we want, of course, so I'm gonna redo it. And we wait. And here we have the second cavity map, and you can see it looks much better than what I had before. Let me show you the one I did. We got this edge. This is where I painted before, so that's where you get this edge here. Not nice. But now we're working with this, and this is gonna work very good. So I'm going to delete this one. Just click the dustbin here. And then I can hide this one as well. So let's start painting again. Switch into delit mode. And we are going to find another of my maps here. I think this one could be pretty nice. Let's try it like that. And get a bit of an alpha in, so it's not so harsh when I paint it. And yeah, I think this works good. So I'm just gonna get a little bit of this in. So just here on the edges. Now it is luckily that most of this is just me fixing the bottom, so the bottom would 95% of the time would be hidden underground, so I of course have to do a good job of this, making it look kind of seamless, but I'm not gonna overdo it because it's not worth that much time. So first I'm going to do the edges here, just all the way around. Working with the light touch, so I don't use the full opacity all the time. And now we're going to try to use the cavity map. So you get these more on concave, more on convex, less on concave, less on convex. So we are going to try to paint more on convex. Just get this brighter texture a little bit more on the tops here, just to make it blend ever so slightly. Now you shouldn't overdo this either, because it can sometimes create some hard edges there. That's not always what you want, but we got a darker base now, and on the tops we want just a little bit of a brighter texture on it. Something like that. And I think this could be close to being done. Could choose a darker texture here also. Then we can switch this mode to more on concave. Okay, we're going to be happy with this. I think that works just fine. And I'm just going to see if there's any other parts of this model that needs a little bit of a touch-up. I think this looks all good here. Looking good. I think it was as easy as that, and it's now done. All right. So I'm gonna collapse this layer here. And then just show you a few more tools that you have at your disposal here. So you got a very nice clone tool that can be used, and this could be a good candidate here. So you just control click down your point, and then you can use this to just clone in a little bit. It works decent. It's not the world's best, but it's gets you out of a couple of situations every now and then. I also have this coloring tool here, so you can darken, lighten, and work with the saturation, which is really good. It's nice to be able to use different saturation, steal the saturation and the colors from the scene and paint it over your hand-painted textures to make them closer to each other. So I'm gonna do a darken. I'm using very low opacities here, but this is how I would paint out if I feel I have some lighting baked in that I don't like. So let's go here, for instance. We can just use always. Just ever so carefully just bring it down a little bit. Maybe feel this one should be a little darker as well. And here you have a few blending modes where you can also use it on more on dark, more on bright. Let's try more on bright only, so we only touch that. Probably is the better way to use this tool. Okay, I would think this one's pretty much done. I'm just gonna repair this a bit. It looks a bit odd, I think. And then we're done. So I'm gonna try the less on concave here, and we see what this one will do. Okay, that's good. We are now done with this. Let's quickly check in shaded mode if there's anything we need to fix. Let's bring the depth opacity down to 0 here. It's always a good idea. See? And now we can save the scene, and we're going to export the textures. There are actually a couple of ways where you can export the textures. So let's do the easy way. We're just going to export the diffuse now. So you got textures and then export, and you can choose color albedo map. We go to 3D coat, and under export we'll give this a name. Can already now start with the proper naming for this. This one will be named like this, and then 8K underscore D for diffuse, and here will be a T underscore for texture. And I'm choosing the EXR, so I get it in get everything over in into Photoshop. If I export here, I got PNGs, but these actually only exports in 8-bit. This is the only one that goes in 32-bit. Now there is other ways where you can export this as well, but this is by far the easiest way, I think. Okay, so I've opened it up in Photoshop now. You can see it comes in a little bit overbright, so we need to adjust for that. So if we go up to image, and we're gonna fiddle with the exposure. So we're gonna adjust the gamma correction here. So we put it down to 4545. And that should be the correct. And then we're gonna convert it to 16-bit and just click it to exposure and gamma. Now you might think that you can adjust the gamma here instead of what I did, but that would be wrong. You get a very different result. So do it like I showed you there. In first adjust the exposure, adjust the gamma, and then just convert it like this down to 16-bit. And then we can save it as a PNG. So this is the 8K texture for the albedo, the diffuse map that we are going to use. We're going to scale it down to 4K and use that. But this would be the master file for the whole thing. And it really is as easy as that. So albedo is done. Normal map we have also done. And now what we need is an ambient occlusion, and we need a roughness. So let's start with the ambient occlusion. So I'm going to go back into 3D Coat and generate another ambient occlusion there. In 3D Coat, you remember I have an ambient occlusion already. If I turn that back on and just do a standard blend, remove the lighting. So you can see it's a little bit too harsh because I used that gamma curve on it, which I don't really want. So I can actually delete this one at this point. And we're going to generate a new one. And we're going to use the linear, just one, no gamma curve applied at all. And instead of hemisphere, we're going to use a sphere, because now we want just in the crevices. It's the only place where we want some ambient occlusion. And this is going to take a bit, so I'll be back once it's done. Okay, so the ambient occlusion is finished. Let's look at it here, standard blend. So this one we can use just as it is. I can actually send it over to Photoshop directly. So I have this option here, sync layer with external editors. You can see what that looks like. Leave as is, don't color manage, and here we go, here it is. So it's only in 8-bit as well, but I don't really need much more information in this. So what we're going to do now, we're going to create the ORT texture, the occlusion, roughness, and translucency texture. So in order to do that, I'm going to base it off this one. So I'm going to save this. And I'm just going to save it as ORT. Okay, it's done saving. Now I have a way of creating my roughness. I put them in a few actions here. So let's see what it does if I click this. Here we go. So let's take them one at a time. So what first thing that I do is that I create a black and white layer. Now this is a Photoshop feature that will turn things into a black and white photograph. What it does is that you have the option to tweak the individual channels here if you like, to get the results that you need. The yellows can be brightened up so you get exactly the intensities you want on your reflection map. Next thing that happens is you got to invert it, because it's a roughness texture, so white means that there is no reflection at all. So we gotta tweak the levels after that, so we get it to be quite... It's going to be almost no reflection here at all, so I'm just going to kill that off a bit and do it something like that. And I find that's a good start. Now what I also like to do is I can get the occlusion layer and I just paste it in here. So we have to invert it and change the blending mode. I choose something like screen or linear dodge. Screen I think will work fine here. So what we want to do is want it to be a little bit less reflective in the crevices. So let's see, maybe that's a little bit too lame. Let's go for the linear dodge. That's going to be quite a lot. Yeah, that's got more of an effect. But we want to dial down the opacity a bit so that it doesn't become too crazy. So let's put it somewhere around there. So now it's going to be completely non-reflective in the cracks and that kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to merge this. Now I have my reflection layer, and what I want here is I want to do my ambient occlusion layer. So copy that, go back to your channels here, and we put the occlusion in the red channel. So just paste it over. So now we got roughness in the green, and here we should have translucency. It's not going to be too much here, but we can just put it to black for now. So that's the result we have so far. But we could make a little bit of a translucency channel there as well. So I'm going to open up my diffuse map, and I'm going to use that to extract a translucency map. So how I do that is I'm going to select a color range. So usually it would be if you have some green plants or some algae or something, you would use that. So I'm just going to click on one of the green ones there and click OK. We copy that and go to adjustments, desaturate. Turn it black and white. Just going to fill in there and tweak the levels a bit. Just something like that. It shouldn't be super bright or anything. It's not a very visible map, but it could add a certain effect in Unreal Engine that you get a little bit of a glowy effect on the algae or the moss. So with that done, I am gonna blur it as well. Gaussian blur set to 2 is good. Zoom in just so we don't get any sharp edges. We want it to be a little bit fluffy like this. Could even blur it more, but I'll keep it like this. And then flatten the image, copy it over. And there it is. Now you got occlusion, roughness, and translucency. So this is what I would use for this kind of object. It varies slightly from object to object. I mean, something like an orm texture is quite preferable, where you replace the translucency for a metallic texture or something like that. I feel I don't really need that many textures to get this to work. Actually, it's pretty much only the roughness that has any big impact. The occlusion, you can use it sometimes. It does have a little bit of an effect, but normally it will be taken care of in the render anyways. So let's save this. And we are now done with the texture. So next step is just organizing it a little bit and bringing it into Unreal Engine. And after that, we are done. Let's clean the project up and export all the textures to a new folder. So I got these in 8K, 16 bits, and we want to convert them to something a bit more manageable. So what I do, I have set up here already where I can convert them to 8-bit. It's just a little action. You could do the same thing. Just mode, go to 8-bit. So I take this one, go from 16 to 8-bit, and then the first one will be scaling it down to 4K. So this is just image size down to 4K, but put them up as actions so things move along a little bit faster. So now it's 4K, and I'm gonna save it. See if we can find the path. There we go. So I got a folder here with textures. So you got the 4K here. You just need to change the name from 8K to 4K. All right. Do the same thing with the Ort texture to 8-bit and then to 4K. And I'm going to save that at the same place. Textures 4K and it's a 4K. And also the normal map should be 8-bit. Now Unreal Engine does accept 16, so you could 16 bits, and it does accept 8K textures, but I think it's a little bit overkill. And as long as I keep the masters, I can always publish them in that quality at a later time. I found no difference with the quality whatsoever. For me, that's fine. The high res and you got it in 8-bit is just fine for everything. Most of the detail comes from the Nanite sculpted mesh anyways. So let's see. 4K. So this is all we need to do. And I would also scale these down to like 2K and also one for 1K and save them at the same place. It's just good. So we can optimize it a little bit at least. But I'm going to fast forward from that bit, and we are now going to go to Houdini to export the mesh, clean it up and that kind of thing. I'm in Houdini and I'm going to fix the mesh, put it into position and that kind of thing, erase a few attributes and such. So I prefer to use Houdini because, well, it's my favorite program. And it can do a lot, especially it's good at organizing stuff. So I got all my pieces in here, and right now I'm working on this one here, HXSC. So let's dive in and see what I got here. So the one I exported last time when I did the textures from Reality Capture, that's the one I'm importing here. But you can see it comes in absolutely huge. So we need to fix that, of course. So let's walk down my little node tree here and see what I'm actually doing. So number 2 here, it's I have a reduce node where I could reduce it to 1,000,000 if I wanted to. Sometimes I prefer using the Houdini reduce. It's very nice and accurate, I think. But the first thing that needs to happen is to scale it into approximately the scene. So I found out that the number 0.05 in this case is the correct scale-ish. It needs to be a little bit smaller, but it's very close. So now we're in the ballpark. Next thing we need to do is clean up the attributes. So if I click here, middle click, I can see I got all kinds of attributes here. I got alpha, I got CD, I got rotation, name, material paths and everything. And we only need UVs and normals and points, of course. That's it. The rest can go. So we're going to clean all of that stuff up. So that I'm doing in this node. And you see now we got points and UVs. So you can see here which attributes we are deleting. It's all of these here. By putting an asterisk there, it means I kill it off, all of it. And the vertex attributes, it's only texture UVs that are left there, so that's fine to leave empty. And then here we also got a few and a few. So since we're only using one texture on this, we only need we don't need any texture attributes or material paths or anything like that. So the next thing I like to do sometimes is just smooth it a very tiny bit, especially if I've used the Zbrush decimation master. It sometimes creates these triangles that are kind of overlapping in a way, or they're very close together and doesn't look nice. So by just moving them aside just the tiniest bit can sometimes help with that. So I don't always do it, but I do it sometimes. And then I put the normals back on. And now we've got to rotate it into position. So I change that so we got it nicely resting on the ground. And I'm just going to fix the scale a little bit. It's a little bit too big, so I'm reducing it with 10%. And this node here will be the name that is in the object when you import it to other programs. So now you will have an object that's got points, normals, UVs, and it gets the name from here. So it's very, very clean and efficient. Then I just save it out to a folder in FBX. There are a few things to think about here when you use the FBX exporter. First of all, this one comes in by default export in ASCII format, but you shouldn't do that. Every other program takes binary just as well, and Blender does not read ASCII format actually, so it's better to just don't click it in, just not use it. Then I also like to click this convert units here. So what this does, if I don't have this clicked in, since Houdini is measured in meters, it's gonna turn out when you come back, when you export it to another program that's in centimeters, it's going to be a scale difference of 100, which is crazy, so you have to compensate for that in Unreal Engine when you import it, which we don't want to do. But if I click in this, it's going to pretend that it's the same scale as in Unreal Engine, so that's all fine then. So then I don't have to tweak that in Unreal. And I'm also going to click in compute smoothing groups. It's something that Unreal Engine likes to have, so I'm just doing it for Unreal's sake. And then I save it out and then we import it. I'm now in Unreal Engine and I'm gonna import the assets I just made into the engine here. So I got a few other ones here that I did just recently. I'm gonna make 20 of these, and then they're gonna be published in an updated package of first the Roman ruins assets for FBX, and then I have they are eventually going to end up in this package here. But okay, let's take a look at how we get stuff in the correct way. So this is all approved by Epic, this folder structure that I have here. So if you do the same, it will all be fine. So we're going to create a new folder, and it's going to be named Roman Ruins Pieces. Let's see here, Roman Ruins piece, and then HXSC, that's the ending I have. So Roman Ruins piece XHC, and then I can check the other ones. I got a materials folder, I got a meshes folder, and I got the texture folder, so I'm going to create that as well. So new folder, materials, another folder, meshes, a new folder, textures. If I expand another one here, you can see that in textures I have 1K, 2K and 4K, just to be able to optimize the textures a little bit. But let's dive in here into meshes. Now there are two ways you can import your mesh. You can either click the import, or you can actually drag and drop it in. I'm just going to drag it in, and I will get this dialog here. And now it should all be correct, because when I exported it, I clicked all the buttons that I needed to get it correctly imported. Just make sure it's set to build in Nanite. You can do this after the fact as well. But that's it, just import. And there it is, and it's looking good so far. So let's bring in the textures as well. So I'm going to create a new folder, name it 4K. And we can do the same thing here. We can drag and drop it in. Select all three of them, just drag them in there. So we can do the others while we're at it. 2K, 1K as well. Can drag it in there, 2K there. And the 1K there. Let's create a material. Easiest way, if you have one from before. I'm just gonna steal this one here. Control C for copy. Go to my materials tab there. Control V. And we double click it to rename it to HSC, like so. Double click to open it, and just drag in our materials here, like so. That should be good enough for that. Can close it down. Just gonna hit save all, so we don't lose anything in case of a crash. We can go to meshes and just get that and it's looking kind of okay. Now, okay, I see I might have missed a 4K there. Let's add that ending here. One thing we need to do is double click on the normal map. You might remember that I said I exported as DirectX or as OpenGL, but we want it in DirectX. So if you go here and click flip, we will flip the green channel, and it should now be okay. And we go to the meshes again, and now we can drag this into the scene. Okay, it's the wrong one. Okay, we can go to the... So one thing you need to do is go to the textures and click flip. Okay, it's done. Just check that the flip green channel is on. Then what we can do is go to the meshes and just drag it in. And there it is. It's looking pretty decent. It does look a tiny bit dark, I think. So I am gonna have to tune the textures a little bit, just bring up the the brightness of this texture a couple of percent, maybe 25% actually, something like that. So let's do that. We can click on this and we can open in external editor. That will be Adobe Photoshop. And adjustments, exposure, bring it up. Let's try one stop like this. And then save it. And just click re-import. Let's see where we're at. It's looking better. Could it be brighter? Oh, it's pretty much in line with the other ones are. But you get the drift. So you can easily, just when you bring it in, you can tweak them here. And then I would have to do the same for the 2K and the 1K. Or I just get the 8K I did before and bring that up one stop and then export these out again. But I think the other ones are looking as they should. Let's check this one. You could, this one comes in as an sRGB. We could unclick this, so it's a linear space, which is what they're normally created as. Get it a bit more correct. And that's it. I think we're done here. We got the whole thing from the beginning to the very end. Went through all the steps, and to me, this is it's a great workflow. It's very efficient, creates high quality meshes and the textures, and it's all I need for these kind of simple objects. Now, in the future, I'm going to show you how to handle something that's a little bit more complex and a little bit more broken, where you have to do a lot more fixes. And that's when a program like 3D Coat comes into play. In this scenario, when you get a simple object like these, you can get by with using something like Blender or something to cut off the textures, cut off the meshes and prepare them. But once it gets really, really complicated, you're going to need some of my favorite programs like 3D Coat and Houdini to get all the way through the whole thing. So we dive into that. But this is it for now. It's running long as it is. I think we're clocking in at about 2 hours. So hopefully you stayed with me to the end. And I hope to see you around next time.